Hello guys and welcome back to another episode of Supercoach mates. Well, round 4 is done and dusted. So just quickly before we get into each of the games, we're just going to do a quick recap on our scores and stuff. So I'm going to start off with you, Thomas. How did you go this weekend?
It could be better. Could be also a lot worse as well. I ended up on like 2-1-6-5 or something like that, which is not terrible considering I don't missed out on McRae, which I don't have, and Brody went berserk, which was pretty frustrating. Looked pretty good leading up to that game, but then fell apart a little bit towards the end. And Cripps obviously doing his hammy. We'll get onto that later, but overall not too bad, which you can't really complain. So hopefully, I don't think I'll increase too much in rank as per last week, but probably just a steadier this week, hopefully, and then make a few trades and grab some players in for the next week.
Yeah, and Jonas, how did you go this week?
Yeah, pretty average. Like Tom, 2-1-90. It was a pretty hit and miss week. Some players went well, and then others either burnt me if I didn't own them, like Witts and McRae, or just let me down, like Hinge and Butters and Cherry, and even like Cornelio to a lesser extent. So hopefully next week the scoring's a bit better.
Yeah, I got the 2-1-5-4 this week, and unfortunately I lost to Thomas by about 10 points in our head-to-head league. So, bit of a rough start for me. I'm just going to start off with a hero, so I like doing this. So Max Gorn, 160 points. He actually got his break even, which was 160 as well. So for those people who are hoping he might have a bit of a drop, well, it seems that that's the end of his drop. And Zach Butters, don't know what's happened to him. I think we're going to talk about him shortly, but he's just fallen off a cliff. And I think a lot of people now might be licking their wounds when they see Butters and Heaney were pretty much just about the same price, and Heaney's now very much higher. So, yeah, anyway. So we're going to get stuck into each of the games now. So I'm going to disappear because I'm going to share my screen. So this is obviously Fan Footy, which is a free website that you guys can go on to track your Supercoach scores if you haven't got the Herald Sun Plus subscription or Supercoach Plus. So obviously, one of the big players, Travis Boak's start to the season has been astronomically. He's got another 100+ score here. Thomas, can he keep this up throughout the year, or is he going to fall at some point?
Hard to say now. I mean, each week you expect him to fall off a cliff, and you probably think it's Melbourne against a pretty tough midfield to do the same. But to score 117 against a Premier midfield in the competition, you can't knock him for that. And I think a lot of people went Tom Green this week as a cheaper option after scoring quite well. If you went Boak, you could do one even better. Obviously, 35 disposals. I don't think his efficiency was that great. But to score 117, you can't complain. And if he keeps doing that, you probably missed the boat, unfortunately. But if you want to go different, I wouldn't knock you for doing that. Port surely will come good at some point. Hopefully, fingers crossed. And if they do so, I think Boak will benefit a fair bit. And he's known to score 150s and 160s in a winning team. So, yeah, he's one that I think a lot of people will naturally miss out on because obviously you probably missed the initial point scorings he's had. And 117 has been one of his lowest scores. But if you compare him to the likes of Oliver, Steele, Miller, McRae, he's the one that's actually pumped out consistent scores throughout the board in comparison to all the others who have at least had one sub-100 game.
Yeah, and next player on our list here is my rage trade or my dud of the week, Zach Butters. What's happened to him, Jones? Have you got anything on what's happened to him, or is he just tanking?
I think in that third week when he got bumped, I'm not sure he fully recovered from that. And I think his scoring is also a byproduct of the fact that Port Adelaide are getting absolutely annihilated through all areas of the ground. I think he was on 18 at halftime, so he did well in the second half to salvage basically a 60. But I think now he's going to have a pretty high break even, but he's one where I'd be holding because he's not even at a really elevated price and he still has primo potential. So he's one where I think he can come back and score well, and we saw that in the opening 2 weeks. So if Port bounce back and start winning a few games and Butters has an extra week off from that Power Pepper hit, maybe we might see another 100, but I wouldn't be trading him just yet, especially with some of the other injury concerns we've recently been dealt.
Yeah, and obviously Power Pepper, I gave him a bit of a spray last week for his hit on Butters and told him not to do it again. So I'm glad he didn't do it again, but I think the damage has already been done. So do you have to finish the season with max score? And obviously got 160, which I think was the first time that him and Jackson both got over 100. In fact, they both got over 120. Do you think that this might be a bit of a comeback here for Gawn, or you still got your questions about his long-term potential, Thomas?
I think for the price he paid originally, probably it was a bit long time coming, unfortunately for him. But yeah, he did dominate. Lyset was out of the game quite early, and he reaped the benefits. Finally put a 160 on the board, which is what you paid for. I don't think I have my doubts with regards to his scoring potential as shown by his 160. But I think this year is a year that you could probably get away with having, a cheaper ruck set up, obviously with Perouse and Witts. Their durability is obviously a bit of a concern. It's a long season. We've just started. So it's, question marks on whether they continue, but you obviously probably could get away with it, which obviously helps. Whether or not Gorney can put it back to back, it is yet to be seen. And I think he's just a bit more of a safety barrier pick than anything, because you can afford to, rest well, but he's going to score pretty well or pretty consistently against pretty much any ruckman, which is obviously nice to see, and it's nice to see actually tore the game apart when Lyset went down.
Yeah, and I'm gonna throw this one back to you as well, Thomas, because I don't think you've got this player, Jonas. But Jack Bowie, what are you gonna do with Bowie this week, Thomas? Given
Jonas
that you're an owner.
Yeah, Jonas can speak as a non-owner as well, but Bowie's a bit of a concern. He got moved to I don't know, because I didn't watch the game, unfortunately. I had another commitment, but he got listed on a wing. I don't know if he actually played on a wing. I think he played higher up the field from the bits and pieces I saw of the highlights. Unfortunately, he may have lost that kind of Supercoach friendly half-back role because Jake Lever's back in the side, which has pushed him up a bit. But it could also have been because Port was terrible and the ball barely went down the defensive half. So it's very hard to gauge. Scoring obviously suffered a fair bit. He's one that obviously 11 disposed and still scores a 50. I guess it's not the worst because he barely touched the ball. He does spend a bit of time on the bench, which is a bit of a concern as well. He usually starts off quarters off the bench or finishes quarters off the bench. So it's a bit of a concern. For me, I originally had him in my trade plans. Obviously, Cripps being out for 3 to 4 weeks most likely throws that out the window. So if I'm able to use a trade boost and potentially get him up to a primo, I might, but I might just have to hold fat with him and hope for another decent score against who they play next week.
GWS.
Yeah, the Giants at the MCG.
Could actually work well for him wide ground against a team that aren't looking the best. So could be a hold for another week, but even then I would like to get him out. But unfortunately, I think just with how it goes, I might just have to get Cripps out of there with an injury and hold Bowie, which I don't hate. And if I have the ability to loop him, I might, because he has the potential to stink it up a little bit. But I'm definitely not too concerned. But he's one that I would definitely want to get to primo status ASAP.
We normally don't do this. Have you got anything to add about Bowie, Jonas, given you're a non-owner?
I'm certainly glad as a non-owner that he didn't replicate the form. I think if you can get him down to an O'Driscoll and then Cripps up to someone like a Steele or something, that's certainly a move I'd look at doing. But you can certainly wait another week. I think his break-even will be around 85. And if he scores poorly again, then it's time to trade.
Yeah. So moving on to the next game. So Geelong v Brisbane. So I'm going to put this one to you, Jonas. So can Daniel Ricks be a top 6 defender this year? What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. He takes the kick-ins, he's damaging, accurate kick, but I wouldn't be bringing him in over some of the other more durable options we've got. I think he went 70 a few weeks ago and had a few injury concerns, so he's one I would be steering clear when we've got some pretty good other options around his price that I prefer who have better scoring potential.
Yep. I think that's pretty much my thoughts as well. And what about if you're a Jared Berry owner? Obviously, came in with a 96 on the weekend, which was obviously very pleasing for both of you guys, given that I think you've both still got Berry. What are you guys going to do with him this week? Are you going to hold him, or do you think it's time to get rid of him?
I think, Jonas, you got rid of him quite early on, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
You hold someone who scores 96.
Yeah, 100%. He's one that I was on the chopping block with his kind of inability to finish off games quite well. In regards to Supercoach scoring, he had this habit of scoring 50 in the first half and looked really good and then died off a fair bit. But yeah, it was nice to see against a tough opponent in Geelong as well. Scored 96, did a tagging role in Dangerfield, kept him pretty quiet and actually looked quite good considering his shoulders pretty much made a paper mache. Seriously looks a concern every time he gets near it with his right shoulder, but he did a fair bit of damage and it was nice to see he didn't get subbed out, so it didn't seem to be too serious. And it's good, yeah, 100 point score there. You can't really complain with that. And they go into a nice run of fixtures, I think, pretty soon. So if you can hold on a fair bit longer, it'd be nice to rejig that cash gen and boost it up, and you can basically direct him to a primo pretty quickly. Once the likes of Rochelle and the Co start to peter out, which is definitely nice to see, considering the concerns we had over him of pre-season. But there is that still concern. His shoulder's a massive worry at times. He almost got fairly bad knock early on in that game and didn't look like he was going to return and then came back on. So if you can keep his shoulder nice and healthy, I wouldn't see why not. You just keep him and let him chug along.
Yeah, I think so. So we'll move on to the next game now. So Sydney, North Melbourne. So do you simply have to get Isaac Heaney? Obviously, I think he's the number one scoring forward at the minute. What do you think about that, Jonas?
Firstly, how good was McInerney?
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
He could be maybe a sneaky option now. With Heaney, yeah. He'll be a top 6 forward, but I think you'll probably be able to get him cheaper, so he's not one I'd dash to get. I think he was on 70 predominantly for that game, and then in the last quarter went big when the game was on the line against North Melbourne. So I don't think he's going to keep up this form. I think he's closer to 100, 105 with the added injury risk. So it's one where I think, like with Tim English, you'll be able to find them at a good price later on. They're not going to be hovering at 600k for the whole season. So, but if you want to bring him in, go for it. But I think maybe that boat has sailed now after some of those good scores and those good fixtures. So I'm not sure. And if Papley comes back, is he getting those clutch goals? I don't know. So there's one where I think he's a good option, but he's not a must-have by any means.
Yep. I think that's probably well summed up. Just to interrupt here, sorry. So Bowie's got a break even of 82 for next week, Thomas. So just a heads up there. So if we're obviously doing this on Sunday night, but the app's now updated, so I know that won't affect you guys that are listening. But anyway, so if you have Jake Lloyd, would you be concerned with his sort of lowish scoring? He only got 76 again on the weekend. His break even's probably quite high, I would say, probably up over 100 at least. If you had Lloyd, would you be concerned, Thomas?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, I said it in pre-season as well. I was pretty concerned about Lloyd's role in the side with regards to Supercoach scoring. Unfortunately, I think the ship sailed where he's getting these cheap possessions and getting consistent 120s and 130s. Sydney's defence is generally developed as a whole. You got Blakey and McInerney running off half back into the wings and looking much more damaging than they once were. And even Braden Campbell's developed greatly as a player, and he looks real damaging as well. So they're not reliant on Lloyd to be the main kicker down back, and they're spreading the load much more considerably across those other wings. So it makes it fairly damaging, which is nice to see as a Sydney supporter. But I guess if you're a Lloyd owner, I'd be a little bit concerned. He's going to score pretty consistent. I think the most concerning thing with Lloyd there was I think he was on like 60 something at half time and then really petered off and barely touched the ball in the second half. So he's one of those players that I guess will be consistent to some degree, but with that consistency, you're probably paying well overs for what he's worth. I know people were saying that you're probably paying unders when you got him in the first place to start the season, but you look at all the other defenders coming through now that are scoring probably more consistently and more stronger wise than him. I'd be a little bit concerned. Definitely wouldn't trade him. He wouldn't be in a trade category quite yet, but he puts up another 70. In a winning team, and especially against North Melbourne, I'll be a little bit concerned.
Yeah, his break even's 148, Lloyd, so he's probably going to go down.
Drop off a fair bit.
What about Aaron Hall, Jonas? Are you concerned with these sort of lower scores? I know 97 is not exactly something to, be ashamed of, but it is down a little bit on what he has done, sort of the 110, 120 mark. Is this a concern?
How many disposals was he? Was he averaging like 30 last year?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I think it was something like that.
That's slightly concerning that he's getting a bit less of the ball, but I think if you've got him, you certainly hold him. He's still scoring quite well. And then if you're a non-owner, I'll be waiting a few weeks for that price to dip. I think he's still got that role, that really good role. And some of his kick-ins, I was watching a bit of it, some of his kick-ins were immaculate. So there's no danger of him losing that sort of avenue to point scoring. So, no, I still think it's a really good option.
I was going to butt in quickly. I watched this game a fair bit. And one thing I noticed was that Hall's pulling off kicks that are almost too good for his teammates, something that Brad Hill does a fair bit. And it ends up being a clanger rather than an effective kick, which is a bit unfortunate for his scoring. He's done that a fair bit. Like, he's being quite aggressive in the kick-ins, and he's booted at about 40 metres in a good direction, but the players aren't reading it as well. So I think that's causing a fair few turnovers. I think he had a fair few this game as well. So that's affecting his score a significant amount, I think.
Yeah, his break even's 154, so he's definitely going to come down in price. Aaron Hall. So next game, unfortunately, Collingwood another loss on the weekend. But Jack Crisp, I'm going to throw this one to you. I think, have you got him, Thomas? You've got Crisp.
Yeah,
have you got him? And Jonas, have you got him as well? Did you end up not picking him?
Yeah, I've got him. Yeah.
Okay, so we've all got Crisp. So a bit of a yo-yo here, gone up, down, or down, up, down, and then up again, another 132. What do we think about Jack Crisp here? Is this something we should expect from now on, or is he just going to be a bit of a yo-yo player? I'll start with you, Jonas, since you're a Collingwood supporter. What do you notice anything different about his role or something?
His role this week was slightly better. I saw him a bit at halfback, maybe 30%, and then at the ball in the centre a bit as well. And he started the game pretty slow, I believe, and then got into it nicely. I think in the first quarter, actually, he was on the bench for like a good 10 minutes. So this score could have been a 150. I just think he's one that's going to be up and down every week. But it's good to show that he has that good ceiling, and he's certainly able to average 100 plus for the rest of the year. So he's one where you're going to have to ride those 80s and enjoy the 120 pluses when they come. I think it's going to be dependent on his matchup, how he scores, and then also if he can keep that disposal efficiency up, because sometimes he does turn the ball over. So if he can do that and he has a favourable matchup, he's one where he'll be most likely scoring pretty well. And without Elliott in the team, I think we'll get a slight bit rise in mid minutes, which I'm not sure if it necessarily helps him, but it means he's spending more time around the ball, so he can't be doing too poorly.
No. And Jeremy McGovern, who's just been an absolute brick wall this season for sides that play against West Coast. I think he's averaging 11 intercept marks a game, which is just insane, which is obviously translating to a very nice Supercoach scoring role. Can he keep this up, Thomas?
I don't think he can keep it up scoring wise, but I think teams will start to pay a bit more attention to him just because of how dominant he is as an intercept mark. He's pretty much the best intercept marking defender in the comp and barely gets beaten one-on-one. So he's one that I think you missed the boat on if you tried to get him. However, the amount of ball that's going through, and we spoke about this last week, I believe, or in the Q&A, one of the two, with the amount of ball that's going into the defence for West Coast, it's just he's going to accumulate more than he does so normally. And because of how important he is in the side, you just look at the screen there, he's 94% time on ground. He's barely getting a rest because of how desperate West Coast are needing him to stay on the ground. But you've also got to remember that a complement of West Coast players are still out isolating and what have you. So it's yet to be seen where he can keep it up. But if you started with him for whatever reason, you'd be laughing with a ridiculously good input of scores. I'd be top three defender scorings at the moment. So he's one that, he's probably too late. Over 500K definitely wouldn't pay for him for that price. Maybe if it was like 450, which I think is what he similarly started with, like high 400s. Might be a different story, but I think you missed the boat on McGovern if you wanted to go down that route.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think that ship sailed. What about Scott Pendlebury being defensive eligible? Now, I did flag this a week or a couple of weeks ago, saying that I was hoping he would get that he would get that defensive eligibility, and he's probably looking like sort of a top 10 defender. What do you think about this, Jonas?
He's too expensive. He's 522,000 now. He's injury prone. There's a lot of points going around there, and you can see the ratio there. He was really effective that day, but he's not always going to be that effective and efficient. So he's one I'm happy to skip on because they're just better options who are slightly more expensive and a whole lot more durable.
Is that then Scott Pendlebury?
Yeah. I don't think Scott Pendlebury is gonna play the whole year. He might get rested or do some sort of injury because he is well into his 30s. So he's one that I'd be happy to pass up on, given you've got... I don't think he'll be top 6 because I think Short's ahead of him, Dawson's ahead of him, Stewart, Hall, potentially Crisp, and then you got Hewitt, and then anyone else who becomes defender eligible. So I don't think he's top 6, so I wouldn't be paying over 500 for him.
Fair enough. Right, so the next go. Obviously we'll touch on this later on with Patrick Cripps unfortunately injuring his hamstring and being out for sort of 3 to 4 weeks. So is Jack Macrae a good option for Cripps if you can afford to do the trade? I think it's probably going to be about, it's 150K. Do you think that's a good trade, Thomas? Oh, no, Jonas?
Jonas can start off. I missed it completely.
Sorry, Jonas, did you hear? Yeah.
Yeah. I think you can certainly do a lot worse. Macrae is probably the best option out there. But if you're looking for value, he certainly doesn't present that at the moment. So it depends on what you do if you save money and get a slightly cheaper option, such as, I don't know, maybe a Steele, a Miller, an Oliver, someone like that, who those sort of players could be like 70K cheaper than Macrae. And I think either way is fine. I think if you got like only 80,000 or something for Cripps up, you can afford to get one of those premium mids that's fallen a bit more. But if you want to play it safe, McRae is certainly not the worst option. It's probably the best option actually.
Yeah, I think so. So having a look here, so Darcy Parish has come down a little bit. Petrarca's come down a little bit. So I think there's definitely value in that midfield for those people who are considering trading out Cripps. What about Tim English? Now, had a little bit of a lower game by his standards this year, got 96. Are you still concerned about Stefan Martin coming back into this Western Bulldogs side and basically him having to play with Martin in the ruck? Thomas, what do you think on English?
I'll be a little bit, maybe not concerned too much. I was actually surprised he ended up on close to 100 there, which was quite impressive against Nankervis. Ruck Nankervis is a pretty good ruckman himself. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point Steph Martin does come in. He was suffering from COVID, I think, so he missed out 2 weeks. And he's waiting the wings, and I wouldn't be surprised. Especially they got beat against Richmond. Could well bring another ruckman in to help out English a little bit, which negates his scoring. But I think they're pretty. I saw a tweet about Beveridge saying that he's pretty confident with English as the main ruckman for now. Whether or not that means that Steph Martin still comes back and English plays that number 1 ruck is yet to be seen. But it's one of those things where you probably miss the initial price rise, so I wouldn't get him now, but maybe wait until he gets a few of these 90s in his system and get the 150 out of his cycle. You can easily bring him in because I still think he's going to be a top 6 forward and a handy ruck swing eligibility, which definitely helps. But I definitely wait it out a little bit more. I think there's a few more 90s to come before you want to pounce on English.
Yep, I think I'm the same there. So next game, so Will Brodie got 135, which was the highest score in the game. I know we were flagging him last week as someone who perhaps you should perhaps get in despite his elevated price, and he certainly repaid that 135. Jonas, since you're an owner, can he keep up the scoring? And should we be bringing him in if you're a non-owner like Thomas is?
You only bring him in if you think he's a keeper from here on. And I don't think he's a keeper in the sense that he won't maintain this form of scoring with Sarong, Fife to come back. And I'm not sure how much Midtime Mundy played that game, but they've all got time in the midfield that they're owed. And I think that may push Brodie out a bit. And then there's always the niggling doubt about his level of fitness, and that's going to become a more prominent issue as the season wears on. So I think he's one where if you've got him, you just enjoy the price rises and the good scoring. But yeah, as you've highlighted there, 73% time on ground, obviously a fantastic effort for the score he's had. But I think the ship has sailed. He's 355,000. I'm not sure you could really do that. I think you've got to bank against him now and hope he sort of falls away, because if you're picking him now, you're basically losing out against all the people who have got Brodie since day one, because whatever happens to Brodie now, it's sort of like you're equal with those people who are owning him anyway. So I think at this stage, you've got to hope that Sarong and Fife, to a lesser extent, come back and sort of push him out a bit more.
Just follow up here. Does this change your opinion if I told you had a break even of -16 and it's projected to go up 50,000 this week? So that would push him above 400,000. Would that change your opinion, or are you still going to stick by what you just said?
No, it doesn't really change my opinion. He's scoring well and everything, but at 355k, you want him to make at least 150k at this price, or become a keeper. And I think there are safer means to be able to get that 150k off a rookie like O'Driscoll, for instance, than risk it on Brody, who could peter away a bit. I think he will.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough too. So speaking of O'Driscoll, is O'Driscoll a solid option even with his price tag of being 168,000? Thomas, obviously, I've had him since day one. I just left him on my bench when he wasn't picked in round one, so I'm glad that he's been picked, and his 104 on the weekend definitely helped. But is he an option at 170k, Thomas?
Yeah, definitely. I think I think he was originally 102k, and he's now going to be bumped up to about 170 with this 100, which is nice for someone like you, Nathan, who's had him on the pine.
120.
So increase 50k. Sorry,
this week to about
I'd say about 170 will get up to. So he's definitely an elevated price tag for a rookie. If Bruce misses with suspension, I think he's the one to go for this week. He seems pretty locked down in that back line and scored 2 goals too, as you can see there, for 100, which obviously impacts his scoring, but he's one that you definitely would want to take, I'd say. I wouldn't want to, if you had Bruce and O'Driscoll, there'd be a bit of competition there, which rookie you might want to take, if you want to take both or whatever's. Another question that is yet to be kind of seen. I think O'Driscoll's not a bad option as well. Scoring-wise, he's definitely shown that he can score when given the opportunity. I think the only shit score he had was at 18. I think it was a medi-sub there. And I think the other game he scored a 60. So he's definitely scoring potential is pretty good for a rookie on-field option. Whether or not you want to pay 170k is another option entirely. But I think with the lack of rookies coming through, Neil Erasmus there also a 70, but he's a 167k starting price rookie. So it's one of the things where you just, I don't know, if to toss up whether he's still going to make you probably 150k, which it could well be with if he keeps scoring these 60s to 70s.
Yep. I think that's fair enough. So is Braden Bruce a must-have? Obviously, he got reported on the weekend. What do you think about Bruce? Or is this just a simple case of waiting for the MRO to put down his verdict, Jonas?
If he's playing next week, he's an easy must-have. He's clearly ruck one at the Giants at the moment, and he's doing pretty well. He hits it out to advantage. He's a strong unit and doesn't need much of the ball to score well. So he's a pretty obvious selection for me because his break even will be pretty low. I think if he plays this week and scores around 100, he'll be rising 80,000. With an 80, he rises 76k. So yeah, it's a pretty obvious decision for me. But hopefully for non-owners, he misses a week so you can get an extra price rise out of one of your other rookies before you downgrade them to Bruce or upgrade.
Yeah, his break even's minus 91. So a score of 80 sees him go up by 75k. So he'll be 209k at the end of the week. So
he plays Gorn next week. So
yes, he does.
Gorn and Jackson.
Yeah.
So that'll be a tough matchup. But if he misses that week, he'll then come on and play Marshall and Ryder, which isn't an easy matchup either. But I think at that price, you've just got to cop maybe a 75, which is still good enough. In saying that, he did go 102 against Darcy and 109 against Witts, so he certainly can hold his own. So I think he's already played 2 very good ruckmen and scored over 100, so I have no issues bringing him in. And I think if you're banking on him getting injured, that could very well happen, but he could play 3 games and make 150k before he does that, and then he's already a successful trade-in target. So I'd be backing him rather than hoping he gets injured.
Yeah, I think I'm the same. I'm hoping he misses this week, and that what's his name, Jack Hayes gets picked as St Kilda and can just go up another sort of 40 or 50k, and then that's an easy downgrade for me. But we'll see about that. What about Tim Taranto? Another 121. I know that the big question mark on his scoring is what happens when Toby Green comes out, but so far he's putting the runs on the board. What do you think about his long-term thing here, Thomas, with Taranto?
I can only see Taranto's score getting better. Obviously, he's got a bit of an issue with his disposal efficiency, which has always been his main knock, like 32 disposals there, one behind.
Quickly,
yeah.
Bruce has been offered a 1-week suspension, so that's good for us.
That's big. Yeah, that's big.
Yeah, so if you went early on Bruce, unfortunately, it could be a bit of an issue. You're hoping Hayes gets coming back from Ryder, which could be the same issue. But yeah, going back to Taranto, he's one that people a bit sleeping on, unfortunately. For most people, I think have just missed out on him. He's actually scored pretty well, even though he's had this whole issue with disposal efficiency. He's had to ruck a fair bit of the pill to get to his scores. But if he's scoring that well, I mean, you can't knock him. You just take the scores on the board, and he keeps on delivering. So if you have him for whatever reason, well done to you. But he's one that I'd kind of wait a bit. There will be a downer game at some point where he'll score 70 because he's had 20 disposals instead of 32. But it'll be a wait and see with Taranto. But he's one that you probably would want on your side at some point. It seems like he just keeps scoring.
I think with Taranto, I prefer him over Henny. That's potentially controversial, but he's less injury prone. He's got upside with Toby Green coming into the side and GWS winning a few more games. But I think he's one that you can safely sort of pick at this stage, given the amount of ball he gets. And he's a really good forward as well. So he finds just avenues to goal, similar to Heaney. But he's one where if you want to sort of go against the grain,
a bit of a point of difference.
I wouldn't mind at all. He's one that I'd probably start looking at as well as a replacement for Cripps, because I think there's only upside with his scoring, with more midfield minutes on offer and GWS potentially performing better. But tough matchup against Melbourne coming up. Will be interesting to see how he goes there.
Yeah, obviously he only got one behind on the weekend, but he has shown he can hit the scoreboard. So moving on to Sunday's games. So is Andrew McGrath an option if he gets defensive eligibility? I'll throw this one to you, Thomas. What do you think about McGrath?
I'm just bringing up his scores now for the last couple games. He's definitely seemed to flourish with no Zach Merritt in this side, which is definitely handy. Unfortunately, I think that may impact his actual eligibility because he's spending a lot more time on ball, unfortunately. So I don't exactly know whether he's guaranteed or how it works with champion data and things like that. But yeah, he definitely seems to flourish a little bit. He's had 2 down games before that, unfortunately, as well, 58 and 76. So it's yet to be seen whether this 111 is a bit of an abnormality or whether he can consistently score. But if he seems to getting if he gets that eligibility and then continues his role in the midfield, so kind of sneaks into that eligibility role, then he's definitely not a bad option because he'll go down in price a little bit still and end up with the kind of early 400k. So you'd probably pick him up if he's defensive eligible in the mid 400s, which is definitely worth a shout because he has the ability to score those 120s in the midfield. But it's one of those things where you want to make sure you get all the other top 6 defenders first and probably worry about him last because I think he'll still have the downer games. And it's one of those things where you want to make sure you've got your Stewarts, etc., in your side first. But I think if he keeps this up in the midfield, 25 disposals for 111 is a pretty good return. So, yeah, nothing to shame about, but wait and see with what happens with this eligibility.
Yeah, so basically just to clarify that, so in order to be DPP eligible, they have to spend 35% or more game time in that position. I think he was probably spending about 60-40 split in the midfield and 40% in the back line when Merritt was in the side, but I think that's probably gone up towards sort of maybe the 75-25. So I definitely think that will impact his scoring. I mean, his eligibility, but I guess it's a wait and see with that. We've got a couple more weeks to go with that. So I'm going to throw this one straight to you, Jonas, because I know you've got both of these guys. What do Parrish and Dawson's ceiling look like? Obviously Parrish 121. He seems to have relished Zach Merritt not being there, and Dawson, after his, I guess, controversial low score last week after kicking the match-winning goal, came out with another 97. So obviously you've got both of these guys. So what do you think about these two?
I think Parrish looked a lot like the Parrish we saw in 2021. He was getting more of the ball in the contest rather than the first few weeks when he was getting it around the ground uncontested wise. He was getting a lot more points from like centre bounces and stoppages, which was promising. He did have a lot of the ball, and you'd probably hope for a 140 with the amount of possessions he got. But I think he's certainly redeemed himself a bit, at least for me, from the last few weeks. And I think he's a pretty good upgrade option in the next few weeks. But you can sort of toss a blanket between him, Steele, Petrarca, Oliver. I'd probably be leaning toward Oliver. But I think I'm not really sure if Merritt going out actually helps him, but he's definitely not playing. I was at the game. He was not playing any time up forward or anything like that. So it's good to see he's lining up at every centre bounce when he was on the field. But hopefully he can get on the field a bit more because that time on ground was 78%. But yeah, he's a great option. And then with Dawson,
your left child.
He's a jet. He was on 50 3 minutes into the fourth, and I wasn't even concerned the slightest about his scoring. I just knew he'd get to about 90 because that's just what he's been able to do. And yeah, he's just got a great kick and 27 touches. I think you can pretty safely put him down as a top 6 defender, and then you just have to weigh up if you want the like scoring potential of like a Hall or the safety of a Stewart or the enjoyment of a Dawson, because he gets the ball anywhere, like on the wing, he'll float up forward. He was looking for a nice cheap handball from Walker towards the end of the game to kick a goal because he doesn't mind one of those either. And fortunately, he didn't take any kick. Oh, maybe he took one at the end, but yeah, he was playing predominantly wing. And then in the fourth, he went down back and scored 40 points. So if they can persist with him a bit more down back, like maybe have him down back for half the game, he'll average 105 for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair point. I think Dawson's definitely someone that I'm looking at, despite his roller coaster ride. Just before we go on to Hinge, I will give a shout out here to Josh Rochelle, who some people bizarrely were trading out, had a break even of 42 and comes out with 106. So his break even's now back down to 10 again. So he's got a few more weeks of money making. So just be really careful of when you're trading out your rookies and just making sure that you think that they're at the maximum price potential, rather than just trading out a rookie for the sake of trading a rookie out. Obviously, if they get injured, then feel free. But I guess that's the danger of perhaps trading out someone before their time's up. Is that if they do go big, he's probably got another couple of weeks of money making. Which, speaking of which, Mitch Hinge only got the 37 on the weekend. I can see there's a little hospital sign on here. So he did get subbed off. What do we think here about Hinge, Thomas? So he's got a break even this week of 29. He's averaging 65. What do you think about Hinge as a trade this week?
it'd be interesting to see what the actual injury was. Obviously, I didn't watch it, so Jonas may have a bit more intel
It
on
just
that
says linked
injury.
off with a hip problem. You can probably see it
so I
on
don't
the
think.
screen now.
Yeah, I don't think it was that serious. His scoring did look pretty bad anyway, as it was. I think he might just be a hold because he's pretty much a lock in that side. If he's fit and healthy to go, and he's got the potential. He scored a 90 the week before. Unfortunately, spent a fair bit of time on the bench. I think struggled to get on the field at times because he started off the quarters on the bench, which probably didn't help him too much. But yeah, as I said, probably ends up would get a 70 odd, maybe a 65 odd-ish. If he was playing the full game, as you can see there, 54% game time, pretty much missed half the game, which is not the worst in the world. I think there's bigger fish to fry with regards to Hinge. If it comes out and says it's a bad injury, for what it's worth, and he misses a fair few, I'd say probably a trade and get rid of him. Whilst you can, if you're able to upgrade to a primo early. But he's one that I'd hold chip on. Obviously, it doesn't help his cash generation at the moment with the 37 in his system, but he's got the potential to score pretty consistently. I think he was one that people thought he was going to be a slow burn to start off with, so this is pretty much what you're expecting anyway, and you'd take what you got so far with his cash generation.
Yeah, I think if he's not named, I think him down to O'Driscoll might be a very popular trade this week.
Just quickly on Hinge, I think Nick said after the game that he probably won't play next week. But the fact he said next week sort of insinuates that the injury shouldn't be too long-term. Plus, he'll present a good loophole, not only because McCartan and De Koning play. I think you can emergency McCartan if he does poorly, or if he does well actually. You can then field Hinge and then put De Koning on the bench because De Koning plays on the Monday. But in saying that, I'm not sure if McCartan actually gets up because wasn't he concussed?
McCartan, I'm not sure.
McCartan. When watching that game, he basically got concussed in that collision with, I think it was Cam Zerha.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah, McCartan was, from what I heard in the commentary, he stayed on. He basically didn't leave, and the doctors actually dragged him off due to watching the tape again and actually having to remove him. So I wouldn't be surprised if he has to miss or is forced to miss, and because of McCartan's serious concerns with injuries in the past with his health, I think he's one that wouldn't be a bad move, but he's one that also could miss. Unfortunately, if that's the case, it could be pretty grim looking for people down back because obviously you've either got McCartan and Hinge rotating, which if both of them are gone, it's a bit of a sticky situation. But I wouldn't also be surprised if he plays. I didn't think it was a serious one. It could have been just for the safety of McCartan, considering how much he's missed a footy due to concussion.
Yeah, I think you would be cautious with McCartan given how important he's proven to be in that Sydney side so far over the first couple of weeks. So I don't think they're going to take any risks on McCartan. If there's any doubt, I think they'll just rest him and let him recover given his history. So the Hawthorn game, so James Sicily, another 100+ score on the weekend. He's definitely probably been the second best pick behind George Hewitt from that sort of mid-price defensive range. Can he keep this scoring up, Jonas?
I haven't watched much Hawthorn, to be honest. They're a pretty boring team. So I'm not really sure, but yeah, I think he certainly has the ability to, but there's so many mouths to feed down there, and Impey came back as well. I'm not sure exactly what his role was, but I think Sicily, he's not a top six defender. So if you picked him at 450k, you've done well, but if you're picking him now at a slightly more elevated price, you'd be hoping he'd be top 6. And I don't think he gets there even if he remains fully fit. So one that I'd probably skip and get in place of him a Short, a Dawson, a Hewitt, a Hall, or whoever else you've missed, because I think they're going to put like at least 150 points on Sicily come season end.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair enough. Obviously, I'm in a different boat because I started with Sicily, so that's a little bit different. But yeah, I think at that price, he's probably someone I'd look to avoid just because of that price. And obviously, he's still coming back off that ACL as well, which let's not forget that as well. So I'm going to throw this one straight to you, Thomas, because I know you're a Saints man and you obviously happy your Saints just belted the living bejesus out of Hawthorn today. I can see
nice.
Jack Sinclair here, another 135. So he's so far proving to be a top 6 looking defender. Did you pick him up this week or did you not get him in? And is he someone we need to look at?
Unfortunately, I couldn't afford him, which was a bit of a pain because it was one that I was seriously wanting to bring in. Just couldn't really get the funds from, I think it was an additional trade to get him in, but didn't use a trade button at all, which was nice to save a trade. He's one that I think you need to pay serious attention if you want to bring in a defender this week because he's obviously going to keep rising. He's early 520s, which I think based off the scoring you'd see in the last 5 to 6 or 4 rounds, is definitely unders for what you're paying for him. Obviously, we smashed Hawthorn, so he's scoring quite well. He was named on ball, which was nice to see, so I think they're trusting him to play in the guts. He did even play down back as well, so it didn't look like his scoring was slowed down. The players, I think, are realising how elite kicking he is. He basically has not real much deficiencies in his kicking skills, and I think it's really kind of showing now with the 135 or 35 disposals. He does get a lot of uncontested footy, but he just finds the ball, and when he gets the ball, he's real smart with it. So he's one that I think I'm getting less and less concerned of when the likes of Hunter Clark and Billings come back. I think Billings actually re-injured his hamstring. So he's out for a bit longer, and Zach Jones is obviously with his health concerns. Who knows when he comes back, and hopefully soon. But I think they're gaining more and more confidence with having Sinclair in the mids. He has a dynamic that we've never really had before in that midfield. So I think this is probably the last week I'd want to get him in if you are looking to get him in because you're paying $550 all of a sudden. Maybe you want to reconsider because he doesn't have the huge heights of maybe 150 scores, but he hasn't dropped below 100 yet, and he's, I think, and if he can keep it up, definitely, easily top 6 at this rate.
Yeah, and someone else who sort of cropped up is not on a run sheet here, but Jay Gresham's proven to be a little bit of a late rising cash cow for those who went with him. Another 106, so he's gone up 65k. His break even's 6 this week. So I think if you got Gresham in, I think that's so far proven to be a win. But anyway, so the last game of the week, so Gold Coast versus Carlton. So obviously there's a massive headache here with Patrick Cripps, who I know a lot of people have jumped on in the last couple of weeks. I only got the 38 that was subbed out at half time, or was it? It might have even been quarter time. What do you think about this, Jonas, and how does it impact the other Carlton midfielders?
I think it's one of those where you just have to wait for the scans. If it's more than 2 weeks, you trade, and if not, I think the form that he's been in justifies holding him, and he was on track for another solid
Yeah, he was.
plus. So if he's only out for 1 to 2 weeks, I think it's a pretty straightforward hold. Otherwise, you can offload him. But as for the other midfielders, I think it may positively affect Hewitt and Chera, but I think it has a negative impact on Walsh because he's got less of an outlet of getting those handballs that Cripps usually passes on to him, and he might cop a bit more attention. But I think it certainly benefits the other 2 mids. But in saying that, I don't think it will have too much of an impact because I can't see Chris being out for longer than a month, because from what I could tell, he was like jogging a bit after pulling that hamstring injury up high, and it didn't look too severe in the sense that he wasn't like horribly limping or like not able to run at all. It was just seemed like a bit of a, I put it this way, it didn't look like a Trelaw hamstring that he did a few years ago against Carlton. It seems like a slight little tweak
Less severe
thing.
one.
So I don't think he'll be out for longer than a month, but if he is out for a month, you're definitely trading.
I can just say on here as well that Hewitt was tagging Touk Miller. So does that concern you that he might be given tagging jobs and his scoring might perhaps be impacted a bit, Thomas? Obviously, a bit off topic here because I'm just so annoyed that I didn't pick him two weeks ago. So another 120. And I can just say on here he's been tagging Touk Miller. So what do you think about this? Does this concern you a bit if he's gonna get tagging roles?
I don't think so. I think they can't afford to deploy him as a tagger. I don't think it was a hard tag. If anything, it might be a tagger in the stoppages to stop Miller getting the initial clearance because of how dominant Witts was in the ruck without the likes of Pitney, unfortunately, this week for Carlton fans. But I could see Hewitt score just continuously improving without Cripps, and if so, he's out for the next couple of weeks. He scored a 120 again. He's been so consistent, and he doesn't look like slowing down. I think he was one of those players from Sydney that the only reason why he wasn't showing these scores earlier was because of he was deployed as such a heavy tagger at Sydney, and then even went into the defence a little bit, whereas Carlton is being used as a very consistent midfielder. The other player I'd be a little bit interested in is Adam Saad from Carlton. The whole defensive line looked real strong and they've been scoring well. Obviously not necessarily translating to wins, but I mean, Zach Williams maybe not with 36 disposed, but Doherty, if you got him round one, you'd be laughing. He's been the number one defender and been so good for Carlton. Saad's another one I'm interested in a little bit. 23 disposals for almost a 130 is a pretty good return. And I think he scored above 100, and I think he missed one because of COVID. But yeah, he's one that is on my radar a little bit if he continues his strong run of form, if I'm able to bring in the players that I want. But yeah, he's the whole Carlton defensive line has actually scored real well Supercoach wise for the last couple of weeks. Having said that.
Yeah. And have you got Raul, Jonas?
I think a lot of people do, and I am one of those. And
okay, so what are you going to do with Raul this week? Obviously, another 65, which is, I guess, disappointing for what you probably expected from him. But given his price, it's probably not the worst. What are you going to do with Raul this week?
I'm going to hold him for a bit longer, but yeah, any aspirations of him being a keeper are out the window. I think he's had a bit of a role change. I think he's playing more accountable, and yeah, he's just not getting as much of the ball, and that showed again with not even cracking 20 touches. So it's a bit of a concern, but yeah, hopefully he can rebound next week. But yeah, one that I'll probably look at upgrading soon, especially if he starts dropping in price, because I think he'll have a pretty high break even this week, given that 157 will be out of his cycle.
Yeah, I just had a look there. His break even 68, so he's pretty much, I think, unless he pumps at another 120 plus, he's reached his limit with price generation. But yeah, he seems to be deployed more as a tagger.
68, then yeah, just hold, because he's not going to leak in money.
It's not going to leak too much, yeah,
No.
exactly. But yeah, I think that's all we got time for tonight. We've tried to pump this out pretty quickly, trying to get it out quickly when we can, especially with these Sunday games, with an earlier finish, which is nice. So hopefully if we have the opportunity to, with these earlier Sunday games, we can pump this out pretty quickly. But yeah, hopefully we'll be returning later this week with another Q&A, which has been quite well with you guys putting in your questions, obviously leading in towards round 6 defense. What do you call it? Position eligibility moves and things like that. And definitely the competition spicing up now with now trades providing a lot more value than previous weeks. And I think it'd be make or break for a few teams leading into the future rounds, especially if you're high up there. But until then, we'll catch you later this week for the next Q&A.